Chair Chris Moore.
Here.
Cynthia Russell.
Here.
Tabby Trauber.
Here.
Sean O'Neill.
Here.
Caroline Berry.
Here.
Katie Dunwell. Adam Cunningham.
Here.
Ann Shevlin.
Here.
Tyler Beach.
Here.
Larissa Byers.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. I call to order the continued public hearing on the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2025-26 proposed budget at 6:01 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in the following manner. As a courtesy, members of the public have the option to provide public testimony on the proposed budget before the staff presentations begin. In order to accommodate those citizens who not want to wait until the presentations have been made to speak, community members may elect to wait to testify until after the staff presentations have been completed. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. A timed buzzer will go off when the 3 minutes are up. Second, staff will present their report. Third, additional public testimony will be allowed regarding the proposed fiscal year budget for community members who elected to wait to testify. And finally, after all community members who wish to speak have testified, staff will have time to provide any additional comments to the committee. Information regarding how the public could attend this meeting and give testimony is posted at City Hall and was also timely published in the Wilsonville Spokesman and is also posted on the city's website shown on the screen. Notice was given that testimony could be submitted for the record in advance, in writing, by emailing or mailing it to the city recorder. If you're listening to this meeting remotely, when the time for public testimony is called, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom or press *9 on your telephone if you would like to testify. If you're having difficulties with these instructions, you may call the number shown on the screen and enter webinar ID shown on the screen when prompted. When called up to testify, state your full name and address for the record. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that's already been given to the Budget Committee. Simply indicating you agree with the prior testimony given by a speaker you identify is sufficient. And before I ask for anyone to testify, I did want to mention that there were 2 written submissions that were provided, but they were received, as I understand it, after the deadline for written submissions.
Correct.
So at this point, is there anyone wishing to testify? I have 2 here, so I guess I'll start with the first one and call them up. Roger Fontes. Now, please.
I thought you were going to do some budget talking. Sorry. Hello, Roger Fontes, Fontes. I live in Charbonneau. The secretary has my address. I heard that the Boone Bridge was going to be on the budget, so here I am. Oh, no. Last time, I remember I went over some mathematical calculations and earthquake information from the Department of Transportation, and the last thing I advised you was the data shows that it's a mathematical certainty. We will have an earthquake here, magnitude 7 or greater in the next 40 years. A magnitude 7 quake would destroy the Boone Bridge. In the budget consideration, I do have a budget idea. I talked to you last time about, I spoke with you last time about practicing emergency response. And I'm going to mention it again tonight. I think it'd be nice to have something in the budget, maybe a set aside or something to provide more funding for this. And to do my favorite thing, practice. Ann Shevlin is familiar with what we do at Charbonneau twice a year, well-structured. I recommended last time that maybe we could select a community to do something like that. In Hawaii, where I lived for 14 years, we do it every month. But we live on an active volcano. But we also have a civil defense department, the County of Hawaii. So thank you for listening. Appreciate your time.
Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Fonts. I also have a speaker card for Susan Reap.
Hello, my name is Susan Reap, and my information's on file. I wanted to talk about something that I understand was on the meeting, the last meeting, and it's about smart transit. I wasn't at the meeting, but I listened online, and I'm excited about the proposed changes that are coming to the smart transit, but a couple of issues came to mind from what was discussed. First, it's essential that mass transit in some form be utilized more and more, and it sounds like the planning that Dwight has done for the system puts Wilsonville ahead of the game. I'd like to use my car less, spend less money on gas while doing what's right for the environment, and this is my chance as well as everybody else's, it sounds like. There comes a time when we have to quit talking and walk the walk. Plus, people who live here and work elsewhere and people who live elsewhere and work here will have a great benefit from what is planned, it sounds like to me. It's a great way to get cars off the streets and give free and convenient transit both in and out of town to residents and workers alike. Next, I've been leery of TriMet myself because of everything I've read, and I've never used it. However, as do the concerns of Councilors Dunwell and Cunningham, and I understand that Councilor Cunningham has dealt with the less pleasant part of society, to put it mildly. And what Dwight said to address Councilor Dunningham's concerns makes complete sense. I appreciate and understand the care with which she stated her concerns. I think all of us are hesitant when we do something we've read scary things about, and they grow bigger in our minds, and we apply them to all circumstances. And like I said, I've never ridden on TriMet for many reasons, but I do know this: people respond in like as to how you treat them. And I think we can defer to Dwight's experience and judgment. Kind, polite drivers and small, clean buses, which are free, will elicit good behavior from passengers. And I know I'm going to sound like Pollyanna here, but it's true. And I'll give you one example out of many I've experienced in my lifetime. And I'm kind of old, so I've had a lot of experiences. And you probably have also. But way back when I was in my 20s and living in inner city Baltimore, training for what's now called AmeriCorps, groups of teens and early 20 young men would hang around the street corner. They saw I had a transistor radio. They asked me if they could borrow it for the weekend, as they had parties to go to. And I said, sure, but if they used it all weekend, when they brought it back, could they please put a fresh battery in it? Everyone in our building, the adults and the fellow trainees, said I was nuts and I would never see that radio again. And I said, yeah, of course I would see it. And I did. I met those, they called them hoodlums then. I met them with trust and respect, and they knew I wasn't looking down on them. They brought the radio back, and it had a new battery. And that was just one experience out of many. I think we're lucky to have the quality of services and experts we have in Wilsonville that keep us a step ahead in what we do and the way in which we do it. I think Dwight's thoughtful, humane approach that is gleaned not out of thin air, but from experience, sets a good tone for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Reap?
I haven't asked a question in public testimony before, but as a transit user myself, I was wondering if you'd be comfortable sharing what transit services, like smart transit services, that you use or are wanting to use.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so what smart transit services do you use or are you wanting to use?
I haven't used very many because when we moved here, it was the start of the pandemic. And as soon as we could, we just tried out going to Freddy's and back. And we haven't used as many as we should because it was sort of limited where we could go. I mean, we can pretty much walk where we need to go, but it's nice to think that we're going to be able to go farther. I mean, if we can go like to Oregon City and to Clackamas, we did a protest recently in Clackamas County, and it looked like there were a lot of pretty neat shops in that big mall area there, and it would just be nice to be able to go places like that, getting on a free transit service and not having to drive. You know, a lot of us are getting older, and the older you get, the less you want to drive to places like that. And I think we'd find that the more people talk about it and use it, the more it'll get used. It takes a while, I think, for a ridership to build. But as word spreads, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. And then I think I'd sure like to see something going to Portland, I'll tell you that. So does that answer your question? Okay.
Thanks. All right, I have another speaker card for Julie Fitzgerald.
Hello, Budget Committee members. I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I'm Julie Fitzgerald, and I live at 7725 Southwest Arbor Lake Court in Wilsonville. And I will add for the record that I did serve as elected mayor from 2021 to 2024. And I have submitted a letter for the record that I think you have in your email today. And I appreciate you reading it. I'm not going to read it aloud. I will say also that my husband, Bob Renfro, also submitted testimony, and he's not able to be here. He's at another meeting in Wilsonville, so he will probably come and read his testimony at another time. But I'm going to describe his a little bit, because Bob and I moved to Wilsonville. We never expected to live here. And one of the main reasons we moved here was first because of a horse. I came down to help my friend with a horse and noticed this Villebois neighborhood and just thought it was really unusual. I'd never expected to live in Wilsonville, and one thing led to another. We noticed the library was really great. And then we found out that we could actually take Wes to work, and that was a game changer. And so since 2007, we both rode Wes, or the 96 bus, to work. Bob rode it a lot more than I did. We're both now retired. And when you read his testimony, you can see that he is a devoted transit rider, and his experience would take him to, we would walk 1 mile, wonderful walk, get on Wes. It's like being in a beautiful, nice, quiet airplane in many ways. You have Wi-Fi, you got to know the other travelers, and it's actually run like a train. There are conductors, and they have different rules than they do on Max. Some of you who ride it know exactly what I'm talking about. And they get to know you, and it really becomes an actual different little community. And then you get to the Beaverton Transit Center, walk over and get on our train. He would then go all the way to North Portland. That was mainly where he always commuted to. My two commutes, one for several years, I commuted to OHSU Foundation downtown or up on the hill. And why did I do that? It was relaxing. Far easier than driving. I would have had to pay something like, I believe, $250 a month to park at OHSU. They don't have parking for everybody. And so no matter what your wage is, you're going to have to either travel by bus, walk, or pay $250. I'm sure it's much more than that. And then I had moved on to a job across the river. I could even ride my bike to that sometimes by riding up to the bus stop near the Holiday Inn, because of the way TriMet takes over part of our service area. That's how you have to do it. Get on the 96, put your bike on the front. I would ride it to take the bus to the waterfront, and then ride across the river to my job there. And it's just a great part of the day. And then I also had my 6.5 years as executive director of the Oregon Zoo Foundation. That was the easiest commute ever. And so when you read Bob's letter, because he spent many more hours commuting, you'll find out some of his experiences. And so let's go to other people who use mass transit. And most of the people that you see are riding it probably for the same reasons we did. That it's easier than driving. Maybe they don't have a car. There are all kinds of different reasons. And when I think about the years I've spent sitting in these chairs and in many other chairs around the area in the meetings that you go to when you're on city council, talking to people, mayors from other cities, you talk a lot about the workforce development needs that we have in our area and also the transportation needs. And you hear about traffic. And I know, Councilor Cunningham, you've talked a lot about traffic. So in the email I sent you, none of us like sitting in traffic. You'll see some references from ODOT about the reasons they decided to start a pilot project of the bus on shoulder in 2021. That's when it started. There was a lot of news about it, and you've got all the bullet points in my long and very boring letter, probably. And it was saving on fuel. But this bus on shoulder is, I think, a genius way to allow more people to move down the road at a greater speed than you ever could, because when the traffic slows down to 35 miles an hour, that bus is able to then go onto the shoulder and you glide along past the other cars and get to your destination. So it's not asking anybody else to get out of their cars. It's just an additional option for people who want to do that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, so in conclusion, I really encourage you to support the bus on shoulder opportunity that we have here in Wilsonville. And the reason it's happening with SMART, ODOT identified that SMART had the capacity to do this. TriMet didn't have the buses or the capacity to do it, and there was this trial period, and it was successful, and here we are today. I actually do go to Clackamas Town Center a lot for different things. I have had lunch fare, and also the shopping center across there. I go to Kaiser. I do have a car, and so for me, I've never had the opportunity to take a convenient bus to Clackamas Town Center because there really hasn't been. It's a roundabout way. But when you look, you could actually research this need for this bus on shoulder by looking up, is it Clackamas Ride? Is that the name of the shared website? Clackamas Ride Share. That is an excellent reference to read about all the regional transportation systems that our neighboring cities have. And this route to Clackamas is just excellent by letting people connect with those services and being able to get around to medical appointments and so forth. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about that a little bit. And I appreciate the concern about safety. We've all read things and we know of things that happen that are either on the road with cars, certainly on buses. We've had an experience not far from where I live with firearms. I've had a firearm experience in my family with my grandfather many years ago. So there's a lot to be concerned about, and when we hear about there being a gang shooting at Clackamas Town Center, that's a serious thing. What I think about in terms of our greater community on how to respond to that is more opportunities for people to get an education, go to OIT, go to Clackamas Community College, get a higher paying job, and travel to that job, and just keep building prosperity. So I'm not going to stop going to Clackamas Town Center. I'm going to keep going to Clackamas Town Center. And when I was there last week, it was just packed. there were all kinds of families and people, and I was glad to see that and hope that it keeps it keeps being a strong, good place for us and that it gets safer and safer. So my last point is about the cell phone chargers, and that was something I wrote about in my letter, which I'm not going to read here today, but it must have been, these things all take a long time, but as it could have been even 2 years ago, that after several of the mayors and city councilors in our area spoke up at the C4 meeting, which I know some of the city councilors go to. It's the cities in Clackamas County, about ways to respond to the needs of our houseless individuals, people who are homeless or almost being homeless. Each city does not have the capacity to build a homeless shelter and do these elaborate things, but our county has a lot of resources. And the reason they have actually more resources today than other counties in our state is because of the voter-approved supportive services tax, which I think has about 7 years left on it. And it has delivered millions of dollars to Clackamas County. I know they've probably spent it better than any other county in the metro region and managed it. I think the additional funds generated for Clackamas County from that tax by people in Wilsonville and all across Clackamas County. They're paying the tax because they have a certain income level, and also businesses at a certain high revenue generation. They're paying it because the voters voted it in, and it amounts to about $40 million more a year. I think that's on the low end that Clackamas County had. So the cities asked, how can the cities get some of this money directly? And the Clackamas County Commissioners responded. I think they were the first ones in Metro to do something like this, and they put together a grant application and invited cities to apply. And our city attorney was the one appointed by our city manager to lead the effort with staff and the community to put together a grant application. And the grant application, I'm sure you can get the actual record from our city manager, was put together after meetings with Wilsonville Community Sharing and also with Heart of the City. And as you know, Heart of the City is a social services and organization that was started by one of the faith organizations in our community, Grace Chapel. They are a separate 501c3. So Ms. Gail Hinman met with those two organizations and also with Clackamas County, law enforcement, even our Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue here, and really assessed the whole landscape. What are the needs out there? What could we apply for from Clackamas County to make a difference? And the resulting application came from also interviewing people who are clients of Heart of the City and people who are clients of Wilsonville Community Sharing. And the city was awarded a $500,000 grant over 2 years, and part of the spending that was approved in that grant was for cell phone chargers in town center. And that idea came actually from the staff at Heart of the City, is my recollection. And they had said, and it could be community sharing, but I think it was the whole group also put this in their application, that one of the things that would make a difference in their experience in helping the people who are in Wilsonville and they're either homeless or maybe going to be homeless soon was to have a cell phone charger so that they could continue to keep their, communicate with their landlords, their jobs, their social services, all kinds of things. That was the first time I had heard of that idea, and that's where it came from. And now I'm hearing that again, it's being recommended across the freeway at the Voila building. And I recommend that we do have that cell phone charging. When I ride west, I'm one of the people who often has forgotten to charge their cell phone. And I will be one of those people who will probably use it. And I encourage you to use it. I think all of us in airports have probably used cell phone chargers. And it represents one of the key themes several years ago with a prior council that supported the idea of the Vuela building and the ground floor services. And that is that the council, which included Councilor or County Commissioner Ben West at the time, was on our city council. We really liked the idea of having a ground floor on that Vuela building that had services, and it had a gathering place for the community. So it would have we ended up with the transit center that you've heard all about. Wilsonville Community Sharing will be located there. And there will also be some kind of a cafe or coffee house there. And if you look back and listen to the city council discussions those years ago, you will hear the enthusiasm for anyone in the community going to that building and using it and interacting with and helping our neighbors be part of our community and hopefully do better and be our friends. Thank you for listening. Sorry that was so long, and I encourage you to support those two elements.
Any questions? No question.
Are we holding speakers to 3 minutes?
It doesn't appear we are. I did read before that we would hold the speakers to 3 minutes. It appears we did not this time. I would ask that we have another speaker here, but that we try to adhere to 3 minutes if we can.
Yes, we have a shot clock. We've never had, in the 14 years that I've been here, I think this is the first time we've actually had public testimony at a budget committee meeting. So it's my fault. I should have coordinated with staff beforehand and said we need to have it up. I didn't know who was speaking. I didn't assume that we had any speakers, so my bad. I apologize. So whoever's speaking next, you have 3 minutes.
I have a speaker card for Kristen Ackervall.
I won't set the timer until you state your name and address. No, we got it up.
Yeah, no, I can be quick. My name's Kristen Ackervall, and my address is on the speaker card. And I wasn't really expecting to speak. Just kind of, I miss you all. So here I am. But since we're talking about transit, since we're talking about SMART, one perspective that I don't know if we've spent much time on, that I could share some information on, is that SMART serves a lot of youth in our community. And I think actually my daughter has ridden SMART, and she loves the ability to go to Bullwinkle's herself independently. She can go and spend her Target gift cards taking SMART. She can get to Baskin-Robbins and buy ice cream. And the independence that she feels doing that, she's taken her grandmother on those little excursions and trips. It's a great thing. She feels like she can go and do something and make choices. And I am so glad that she has the opportunity to practice some of that independence and just moving around in the world, as she will do increasing amounts as she gets older. So she could probably be here and speak to that much better than I can, because she's pretty articulate. But she's at home working on homework because she's a good kid. And she's actually, I think there's an 8th grade assignment where they're writing letters to the city council. So you may be getting a letter from her pretty soon. Who knows what she'll talk about? Maybe she'll talk about this. I don't know. But I wanted to share that perspective that, SMART, it does serve some of the youth in our community. I know that some of her friends used it regularly, that the number 4 bus that goes across town, when they were doing the middle school musical rehearsals, which were held at the high school, and rehearsals started at 5 p.m. And, you know, the school district was able to provide a bus for some period, but then when the rehearsal moves later, then, you know, they had to have a different solution. So several kids, you know, parents not home prior to 5 p.m. maybe, and so they're taking SMART to get to that rehearsal. And that's a great thing because we have kids involved in activities, you know, doing things that we want them to do and not just hanging around looking for trouble. So I think it's a really great thing. And I would echo too, pedestrian connections also serves our youth in our neighborhoods. Ability to get between safely, if they're walking, if they're on a bike. These are things that we can build for the future. And I understand you're in a tough spot right now because we have more concerns over the budget, but please build for the future. So thank you, 3 minutes.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Thank you. Anyone else wishing to testify? Hearing no further requests to testify, I will turn it back over to staff to continue with the budget presentation.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Smith, the city's Assistant Finance Director, and with me as well this evening is Keith Katko, the city's Finance Director. Welcome to night 2 of the city's Budget Committee meeting. This evening we'll proceed to cover the rest of the city funds, including policy administration, community development, parks and recreation, library, and public safety. First up tonight is policy and administration. This includes administration, finance, information technology, legal, and human resources. No large changes here. Overall, these reflect as status quo budgets. First, I'll touch on admin. The administration budget includes an increase in community services programs made possible through partnerships with Metro and Clackamas County. This includes the Homeless Initiative budget and Metro Enhancement Grant. Community services programs includes also contracted services for a peer support specialist covered by the National Opioid Settlement. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $2.6 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $2.7 million with no change in FTE. Oops. Okay, next is finance. This reflects a 3% overall increase from the prior year with a budgeted decrease in bank charges or credit card fees closer in alignment with actuals, bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $2.3 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $2.35 million with no change in FTE. Information technology. This reflects an increase in the cost of software and a couple of ad package requests for cell coverage projects at City Hall and Library, and upgrades to camera and control equipment in council chambers, which are approaching end of life. Otherwise, no large changes here, in total bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $1.8 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $2 million, with no change in FTE. Next is legal. This reflects also a status quo budget with an overall increase of just 6% over the prior year, in total bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $0.8 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $0.9 million, with no change in FTE. Finally, human resources. This includes also risk management, reflects an overall 13% increase over the prior year, attributable to increases in insurance and the cost of engaging an executive recruitment firm to assist with the upcoming city manager recruitment. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $1.2 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $1.4 million with no change in FTE. And that concludes our presentation on policy and administration. Before I turn it over to Keith, are there any questions?
Question, is it in the administration, policy and administration budget for the printing and distribution of the Boone's Ferry Messenger?
Yes, communications from the mine
And what's the cost, total cost of the printing of the Boone's Ferry Messenger?
Do you have that line item?
I don't have that readily
Yeah, we can
available,
email
but we
that
can-
out to you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions?
So it's not a question necessarily. I just want to call attention to the continuous GFOA and ACFR awards for, good reporting and on time and everything. I know it's a big lift, so thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we'll move straight ahead into the Community Development Fund, which actually encompasses two funds. And so we'll have Gina Troja, Dan Carlson, and Matt Lorenzen come up and give an overview of the two funds, and then I'll dovetail at the end with more of the financial numbers. So I think, Gina, are you kicking it off?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening, Chair Moore and members of the Budget Committee. I am Gina Troja. I'm the city's Assistant City Manager. And as of 2 weeks ago, I'm also the Interim Community Development Director. So that is why I'm presenting at least a portion of the Community Development Department budget this evening. And as Keith mentioned, you will also hear from Dan Carlson, who will talk a little bit about our building division and building activity. And then Matt Lorenzen will follow up with a presentation on economic development. Keith is going to be my slide guy. So I thought it would be worthwhile to give you a little overview of the Community Development Department. This department includes, as you can see on the screen, several different divisions. The building division, which includes 7.8 FTEs. The administration and economic development, which is 2 people. That includes the community development director as well as the economic development manager. And then the engineering division is 13.5 FTEs. The planning division is 7.10. That also includes a reduction of 6 months of a planner position, which I'll get into in the next slide. So here's just kind of a high-level overview of the Community Development Department from a financial sense. So what I gave you in the previous slide was the department and the FTEs. This really highlights how the department is divided up from a budgetary standpoint. So there's the Building Inspection Fund, which Dan will get into a little bit here. But that fund is, the primary resource is through building permits. Those building permits are dedicated to the administration of the building division, and the revenue is tied to that. The CD fund, that is funded from a number of different funding sources. That includes the transfers from the CIP. It includes fees for project management for both the planning department and engineering. And then it also includes a general fund contribution. Sorry, the words on the slide are really small. Keith is apologizing.
That was me.
That is him. The CD fund is heavily reliant on the development within the city. And as mentioned in the budget document, the letter in the budget document from the city manager, next fiscal year, it's difficult to project what's going to occur in the community in terms of development. And so you'll see some of that reflected in this budget. One of those things is the budget includes a transfer from the general fund of $1.2 million, and that is included in the budget document that you have before you today. In terms of positions, and this is positions within the entire department, as mentioned on the previous slide, there'll be a planner position. We have an individual who's going to be retiring the end of the year in December. That position will remain unfilled for the rest of this fiscal year. We felt it was really prudent financially for us to be mindful of the financial state of the city, and so that position will not be filled for those 6 months. And then the community development director position, That also will be vacant for approximately 6 months. I'm serving in that interim role right now. The new city manager will recruit for and hire a community development director, but that position will allow some savings within this fund, at least for the next 6 months. And then the building inspector position that is in the budget, that position will remain vacant unless there is a need due to development occurring within the community, and at that time that position would be filled. But currently that position is vacant and is vacant within the budget that you have in front of you today. So with that, Keith will hit the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Dan Carlson, who is our building official.
All right. Good evening, Chair Moore, members of the Budget Committee. My name is Dan Carlson. I serve as the city's building official. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight to share some perspective about what is going on or what has gone on with development. We like to share these slides. It paints a pretty good perspective. I'm going to share 3 slides with you. The first slide is related to the volume of permit activity. And this is over the span of an 18-year period. So it really gives you, I think, a good perspective. It's also instructive to help identify historical trends and to help inform our project and revenue forecasting for the next year. So the third slide that I'll share with you relates to the value of projects. So first 2 is volume, third is value. So the first, just to kind of walk you through the legend here, if you'll notice, it's a little washed out on the screen, but it is red. The top red line is commercial tenant improvement, remodels, and additions. In 2024, we had 264 of those types of permits. And overall, if you were to average that whole 18-year period, you would see that that average is 249. So we're actually at a pretty healthy stage with commercial tenant improvements, TIs, permits. And I often say that this, from my perspective, coming from another jurisdiction that wasn't like this at all, this is a very healthy, I think, a balance of businesses reinvesting in their companies, staying in the community, or businesses that perhaps aren't successful and new businesses coming in, so with tenant improvements. So that's, I think, a really good, healthy number. The green line, you'll see at the very bottom, we had 9 new buildings. It's kind of interesting to me that we had 9 new buildings 3 years in a row, 22, 23, 24. So didn't plan it that way, but that is a very healthy number as well. The purple line is number of new homes. In 2024, we had 58 new homes. This is down, actually, from 113 in 2023, but just slightly up from the 47 that you see in 2022. So the current activity, I think, is healthy. Yes, it has slowed, certainly from last year. But it is a good pace. It certainly has not stalled, and that's something that we get asked about a little bit because you hear about all kinds of things in the economy. And then the blue line that you see there is single-family remodels, additions. You'll see that in 2024 we had 144 permits. This is up from 133 in 2023. Interesting little sidebar there. Of those 144, 44 of those were for solar permits. And I'll have you know that we do all of those solar permit installation inspections from the ground using our drone. So that drone has become an amazing tool, allows us to keep boots on the ground, inspectors safe. And actually, we can do those inspections much more quickly. It saves us about an average of 20 to 30 minutes per inspection to do it with a drone. And the really fun part about it is we try to engage homeowners in that process. They love seeing their rooftop and the solar panels on their rooftop. So we always try to make an effort to do that. Moving on to the next slide, if you will, please. You'll notice this is kind of a blown out version of the previous slide, except that it shows a blue dotted line, and that's the total of all building permit activity. So you'll see We're at 1,119 building permits, which is down from the previous year of 1,330 in 2023. But if you took an average over the last, if you went from 2018 to 2024, that 7-year period, that average is 1,121. So we're really within our average where we should be, I think, for overall level of activity. So it's healthy. I'm a bit cautious about this. Brian did an outstanding job of articulating the uncertainty and volatility in his budget message to us all, and this is reflected in that. So I want to move on to the next slide. This is different. We looked at volume, and now we're going to look at value. So this reflects the value of all of the projects that we had for that previous activity. The project value is really more, the reason I showed this is it's tied more directly to the permit revenue that we receive. So some fees that we receive are based on the number of widgets, I call them widgets, like the number of furnaces, air conditioners, HVAC systems. Those are a per unit type of a fee, but most of our fees are actually based on the value. And that value is derived by a cost per square foot that comes from a national ICC, International Code Council table that Oregon Administrative Rule 918 requires that we use. So with that little bit of background, you'll see starting at the bottom in red, the value that you see there for commercial TI remodels and additions is at 19.7 million. So the activity, though, if you kind of remember the last two slides, the activity was higher. So we had 264 permits in 2024 versus in 246 in 2023. So the volume and the value kind of don't really correlate to each other. So the value, the red line, was actually lower from 2023 to 2024. So there's kind of some interesting stories there when you really get into the weeds on it. And I'm going to try not to do that here too much on you. But it does depend on the type of projects. I'll give you a really quick example. In 2022, you'll see that line there, $77 million in value in that year. Well, a lot of that revenue was received through one project, and that was $59 million came from the DAS project. So, $59 million project in 2022 versus, we have all of our projects valued at 19 for that one line item. So purple line, just kind of move along here. The purple line is $30 million in value. That equates to, again, 58 homes that you saw in the previous slides. The green, this is our new commercial work that we've received. We had $58.8 million in value. This is for projects, Matt's going to talk a little bit more about these, but like the CIS project, City County Insurance Services Office, the headquarters now on Wilsonville Road, being built now. The TOD project, that's a substantial, the 5-story project down by the Transit Center. The Delta Logistics project out on Day Road, it's a large warehouse being built right now. And then the Precision Countertops project, relocating their headquarters out onto Garden Acres Road. So, and there are other projects included in the mix of that $58 million. And then the blue line is the last but not least, the healthy level of $116 million. So I think that's pretty healthy. I like to see where that is at. And this has been our experience. So I'm going to touch briefly on the future, and then I'm going to turn it over to Matt to highlight some of the positive impacts from economic development. So when we do our budget forecasting, if you could stay back on the previous slide, please. When we look at our historical data, we also look at well, what do we have coming in? What do we know that is actually on the plate, that has been through planning commission or has been through the planning process, the land use process, that's an entitled project? And so we take that into account when we're looking at forecasting our revenues, not just looking at historical perspective. And we have a number of projects that have been reviewed, they've been approved, they're ready to issue right now, but just because of the state of the economy and other factors, the owners have chosen not to green light the projects yet. And so for new homes, we're looking at forecasting around 70 new homes for the next calendar year. We already have 25 for the last 4 months, January, February, March, April. So we're on track with hitting that new homes target. Single-family remodels, we're looking at about a similar number, between 100 and 150 single-family remodels. Commercial remodels, we're looking at about 250 permits, and accounting for that in our budget numbers. And then new commercials, really kind of it's the difficult one to forecast primarily because of timing and the state of the economy, and you just don't know quite when things are going to land, quite when developers are going to be ready to pull the trigger on those projects. So we have some entitled projects in the mix. The Villebois Village Center actually has 3 buildings. They've been reviewed, approved. They're ready to issue. They're ready to start work right now. But those projects have been on hold for a couple of years, actually, and we've extended those permits, but we just don't know the timing of those. We also have a movie theater redevelopment that we've heard about, redeveloping the cinema, and that we are planning to have that come in. It's a serious project. We have another mixed-use building in Villebois Village Center. That's a $1.4 million project. And then there's lots of other wild cards. We have Level WTC, which is the Sherry's site, looking to redevelop that. That's a $14.8 million mixed-use project, commercial on the ground floor with residential above. Lamborghini, building a brand-new dealership. That's been reviewed, approved, just waiting for the owner to green light that one. And that is a $10.2 million project. That'll be going just south of the Mercedes dealer, a couple lots south, right along the frontage of I-5. Really very interesting project, particularly from a building code perspective. And then we've had pre-application meetings with Cisco on expansion, and Matt's going to talk a little bit more about this. So, and there are others that I could talk about, but as I mentioned earlier, and as Brian mentioned in his budget message, there's really a lot of uncertainty, volatility in the landscape. The timing of projects is challenging. We hear about tariffs and labor shortages and supply chain issues. We hear about lending being very challenging. So we've put forward a conservative budget. Aside from the one ad package that I have in there for scanning of old permit records, our budget is really relatively flat in the building division. So we are planning for a level of development activity to really hold steady, and we certainly welcome any new development surprises if conditions change. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt, and then I think we'll be open to answering any questions.
Thank you, Dan and Gina. Chair Moore and the committee, appreciate the opportunity to say a few words tonight. Looking forward into the next year for commercial and industrial, primarily industrial development, what the outlook is and how that translates into the community development program and revenue projections more broadly. This slide here shows vacancy rates from the first quarter of 2025 across the Portland metro region. And if you squint, you can find Wilsonville at 2.5% there. And as you compare that to our submarket here in the South Metro area, and as you compare that to even just other small pockets throughout the metro area, you can see that pretty favorable conditions here. Vacancy rates are pretty low. So we count that as a positive for sure. The flip side of that is it does mean that there's less opportunity for those businesses that do want to grow here in Wilsonville or relocate into Wilsonville. There's a need for more product in the industrial landscape in Wilsonville. What we have is primarily full. Next slide, please. There are some vacancies though, and so I'll say a few words about those. This building here is at the very north end of Garden Acres Road, and Garden Acres Road is, if you go to Republic Services Transfer Station and follow the curve northward, that turns into Garden Acres Road, and this is right near the entrance to the correctional facility. This building was completed about 18 months ago, and the brokerage team representing it has had some challenges tenanting, but they have secured a tenant for half of the building now, which is Oregon Bolt, currently located in Tigard. They're going to be consolidating their Tigard, Salem, and Portland facilities now into Wilsonville. There's been several other interested parties in looking at this building. One of the main constraints is power capacity. There's a lot of heavy power users looking for places to be where that power is available today. Power is one of these things where it's always available, but there's sometimes a 12, 18, even 24 month timeline to get that level of power needed to a facility. So that's one of the factors here that keeps half of this building still empty, but I coordinate with the brokerage community regularly on this, and I think we'll see it full soon. The other vacancy I'll point to, next slide please, is no longer vacant. We saw lots of headlines about Rite Aid filing for bankruptcy and shedding some of their real estate and closing stores. And the Wilsonville Distribution Center did indeed close, but this property was barely on market before it was leased up again. There was a transition period, but it's now occupied by Wymore Transfer, which is a logistics company based in Clackamas. And their primary customer that they ship for and store cold storage for is Coca-Cola. So it was a very opportune situation for them to be able to locate right next door to their primary client, and they're happy to be in Wilsonville. So some of the perceived vacancy, what I'm trying to say here is not vacant. Next slide, please. Here are a couple real vacancies. The Peyton Business Center, this is located on Barber and Boone's Ferry, pretty close to the transit center. This is a bit of an anomaly property. It's set up as an office building. It's the former headquarters for Payless Pharmacy, or what am I getting that wrong? Is it Payless? Anyway, and then Hollywood Video. It's lived several lives is the point, and it's in transition now. It's a commercial office building in an industrial zone, which makes it a bit of a challenge. But there is interest. It's a great opportunity for research and development and other high wage users. So working hard there. The ownership and brokers are working hard on that as well. There's an interested tenant that they're working with actively there. And then the W3 building, which is, if you don't recognize it immediately, it was occupied by Sig Sauer most recently. It fronts to I-5. It's by the OIT campus, just south of Twist Bioscience and the Parkworks Industry Center. Again, another opportunity. So we talked about vacancy and said low vacancy is great. These vacancies, I'm trying to frame them as opportunity. We have our Wilsonville Investment Now Economic Development Program, which offers a tax rebate to qualifying companies that bring new capital investment and new jobs to the city. These two buildings are both eligible under that program, and so with a high quality user that brings significant investment and jobs to the community, they would be able to apply for that program. So where there's vacancy, there's opportunity. Next slide, please. Dan began to mention this, but Cisco has filed initial applications to develop this site, which has been empty for a long, long time, and raised many questions, both from outside Wilsonville and within the community. What's going on, and why is this still vacant? It was held by a family for many years and finally sold to Cisco, and now they're taking steps forward toward developing. And again, that's another consolidation exercise where they'll be taking facilities from around the region and locating them strategically here adjacent to I-5. Next slide, please. And then to close, I just want to mention, I teed up sort of this idea that there's demand for more industrial space, not only in Wilsonville, but in the broader Portland market. We're one of very few cities in the Portland metro area that still has industrial development capacity. That's a huge asset. And we're trying to maximize that opportunity by bringing online the Basalt Creek industrial area. So planning's not represented tonight, but Miranda's in the room. I'm coordinating with them closely to bring Basalt Creek to a development-ready status. And so what that means is that we will have zoning and development code adopted, hopefully by the end of this calendar year. That's the target. There will be infrastructure alignments identified and a funding plan to construct those over the coming years and decades. And so that will be a big opportunity. Coffee Creek is already online, and we're seeing development start to occur there, and I've called out a couple. Dan already mentioned them. Precision Countertops, a homegrown Wilsonville company, has decided to build their own facility instead of leasing on Garden Acres Road. Delta Logistics on Day Road, Dan mentioned that. And then a call out here to Schnitzer Properties, who has been so bold as to aggregate 50 acres already in the Basalt Creek area, where they aim to build a multi-tenant speculative facility that would accommodate many new jobs and a lot of, frankly, property tax revenue to the city when it's constructed. So that's all on the horizon. So with that, I think I'll just end on that note that there is a lot of unknown and a lot of volatility right now, but I do still see strong indicators that Wilsonville's in a good position from an economic standpoint.
So if you don't have specific questions for Matt or Dan, we can get into
Yeah, if you've got questions for us,
Yeah.
we're happy to answer
Quick
those.
question. There was that chart you showed that had the vacancy rates in different counties and different cities. I'm curious what the source is of that, and I'm also interested in your perception of, 2.5% for Wilsonville. I'm just driving around and looking around and seeing what we have. It feels like that doesn't seem right.
Okay.
And is it because they're counting, maybe businesses that are gone, but the lease is still active, and so they're still paying rent, but they already moved? Or are there things like that going on? Or no, it's 2.5%, and 97.5% of these commercial buildings are full and humming.
Yeah, it's a very astute observation. This was not intentional in my part, but this 2.5% represents industrial vacancy. Doesn't factor in commercial. And you're right, that number would look different. Wasn't omitted on purpose for any reason, but I don't know what that number is. It would be interesting to know. But certainly when you look at Regal Cinemas, Fry's, that's significant square footage, the former Albertsons, you add that all together and it would probably be a number higher than 2.5% for sure.
Right, but but even for industrial, you think it's pretty accurate on the industrial?
Accurate data is always a challenge, and I'll acknowledge that, but I do think that it's pretty full.
It's good, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And are these all industrial? All this data on this chart is all industrial, is that correct?
Right, this wouldn't factor in things like commercial buildings, strictly for industrial, trying to think of another word besides industrial, but warehousing and distribution, manufacturing, those, not where there's retail trade taking place.
So this is all apples, not apples and oranges on this full chart?
Right, the oranges would be the commercial, yeah, thank you.
I had a question, Gina, about the Community Development Director position. So there was discussion about the savings that we're having from that, but you mentioned that you're in the interim in that position. So I would assume that means you're taking on additional responsibility and you should be compensated accordingly. So
Just my thanks every day.
That's all I need.
I would hope there's more. So I'm curious where that savings is coming from. Is it from the position that you used to have or maybe still co-have? Where's that coming from?
You can answer that. Sure.
I mean, she's still doing all of her normal stuff. We've had conversations with her direct reports that she won't be quite as available as she has been in the past. So she's taking over responsibilities of management responsibilities for the downstairs, but she hasn't lost any of her other responsibilities. So some of the stuff, she's kind of maybe downloaded to Andrea for HR stuff. So we're just kind of all shuffling. I'm taking on new responsibilities as well because Mark Ottenot is leaving. So we're all just kind of picking up for each other where we can.
So monetary savings wise,
So
for
monetary
those position
savings would
salaries.
be not filling Chris Namsu, the former CD director. That's all savings.
Okay,
So the position is budgeted at full-time in the budget.
Okay.
But because it's not being filled right now, that means there is a savings of the salary for that specific position.
So salary and benefits for that position, we'll probably save about 9 months of that before that's filled.
Okay,
And then whoever is sitting in this chair in the future, they'll make a determination on, is that a position that you would like shift somebody else to that's already an existing employee, or would you bring somebody from the outside? Those are all conversations that will happen afterwards.
Yeah.
But I can guarantee you for at least 9 months, we'll save that much budget for that position.
okay, so question, whether or not you can or want to answer it, when you went into the interim position, are you getting additional salary and so taking some of that savings from like the full not having a director position?
No, I'm paid what I'm paid, and,
Okay.
love assuming these additional responsibilities. Honestly, this is a great department, and I couldn't be more proud to work with these fine folks that are here today. The savings comes because we budgeted that position,
Yeah.
and so that's where it's full savings for whatever
Okay.
that position was budgeted at. So finance
Okay.
department looks at what the salary is, they look at the benefits, all those additional roll-up costs, that's where the savings comes from.
Okay,
So it's just like what Brian said.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're advocating that I should give her more money, though.
Well, it sounds like she's doing more work, so.
She's a team player.
I love it. I love it.
Okay, so we'll just proceed into kind of the budget numbers, if you will. For building, this is the Dan Carlson Fund, have a $1.2 million 24-25 budget, and that's going up to 1.3. As you mentioned, we're bringing back that building inspector position into the fund as reflected there at the bottom as an additional, but to the degree it's kind of monitored to, if we need it, if the building picks up. So it'll be kind of assessed during mid-year,
And
so to speak.
can we just also just note, I think we've already stated this, this fund is self-sustaining. So it survives, thrives based on the resources it brings in or not.
Right.
So everybody's aware of that.
And then it has that permit record scanning option that Dan mentioned in his budget. And then going into community development, it's split into a couple different departments. There's the CD admin component, has had a budget of $700,000 in the previous year. It's dropping down to $547,000, kind of reflective of that savings of at least 6 months to 9 months of not hiring a CD director. Engineering, 13.5 employees, $2.6 million budget, going up to $2.8 million next year. Part of the differential is, of course, salary and benefit increases, as well as what they are responsible for this, I don't know if it's annual or every 3 years, this thing called a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System Permit. It's quite laborious. Engineering is responsible for that component every couple of years to make sure we are adhering to various environmental regulations. And they do have some or at least one vacancy in that position of an engineer that we're trying to fill that has been rather difficult to fill. That is still open. And then our planning department had a 24-25 budget of $1.4 million, and we're dropping mid-year retirement. We're dropping that down, the FTE count down from 7.6 to 7.1. Proposed budget is increasing, though, from 1.4 to 1.6. Great majority of that is a grant-funded study they're doing called the Wilsonville Industrial Land Readiness study. So that is grant-funded, and that's that $210,000 increase. If there's no specific questions on that, I wanted to take a quick detour and just to let you know, in the back of the book, we do a 5-year financial forecast of all the operating funds. And so here we have the Community Development Fund here. And for 25-26, the CD fund is projected to end with a $2.2 million balance above the financial policy minimum. However, as you can note here, reserves without that green-lighted development going forward are expected to dip below that threshold by fiscal year 27-28. So we're closely monitoring that. And of course, you know, like as Dan and Matt mentioned, there's lots of development circulating the city. When that comes, it's hard to pinpoint. Certainly as the development picture becomes clear, adjustments will be made one way or another. And as that proceeds, as they mentioned, this trend is driven by the economic uncertainty and the unpredictable nature of future development. Given those unknowns around timing and scale, we've really conservatively budgeted development revenue for 25-26 at approximately $446,000, and that's down from $1.1 million in 23-24. And part of that is we just don't know. I mean, we just don't know. It's an unknown. And certainly we're hoping that, you know, some of those developments get green lighted and move forward. So we might be a little bit overly cautious, and the approach balances the fluctuating nature of revenue and expenses and reflects kind of the unpredictability of development. So we will see how that proceeds, but at least for the next few years, they're well above the financial policy minimum, and we'll see how development unfolds. And that is it for CD in general, and then we'll move into Parks and Recreation, unless there's any more specific questions.
Can I ask a question on that chart? Keith, I did the same thing at last year's budget because you showed a similar slide, and I think my comment was something along the lines of, in private business, if a finance person showed that slide without a clear path to how that line is not going to cross,
right,
that there would be personnel discussions going on, right? And I think your response at the time was, yes, but the point is to highlight this and that this is the challenge we have. And so it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
If I were to see the one that you had presented last year, and I'm not asking you precisely because you don't have it in front of you, but should I expect to have a similar slide next year and the line keeps going out to 28-29, to 29-30? Or was it crossing the line last year at 27-28 and we're just getting closer and closer to the cliff?
No, I think it keeps getting pushed out because development continues to materialize. But if anybody has a crystal ball of what the economy is going to look like next week, let alone in 6 months, I mean, I'll take it and I'll put it into the formula.
It's a really hard fund to forecast, because a lot of the revenue projections are extremely conservative. But in terms of your point about internal discussions about personnel, those conversations happen every year during the budget process. This year they got a little more real in terms of not filling vacant positions. So we always have the ability to impact something at any time. Anytime a position becomes vacant, we always analyze, do we need to fill that position? If so, does it need to be that exact position? Can we hand these duties off? So those conversations are constantly happening throughout the year. And we can never let that drop below the reserve required by our financial policies anyway. So we
Can't do it.
we've never had to make, I've had to make drastic decisions in other cities. I've never had to make them here. Not to say it couldn't happen down the future.
Right.
Yeah, Wilsonville's well-positioned for development. It's just, all the stars have to align in forces greater than we have available here with the economy, the interest rates, and a myriad of other economic variables, I guess.
Good, thank you.
I think might be done with the community development. We'll have Chris Ammerman come up and talk about Parks and Recreation.
Good evening, Chair Moore and members of the committee. Chris Hammerman, Parks and Rec Director. So in Parks and Rec, we basically have two divisions, General Services and Park Maintenance. And together we work towards our mission, which is to recognize community history, enrich quality of life, foster a safe environment by preserving, maintaining, and improving recreational opportunities, social services, and natural resources and parkland for current and future generations. So on the general services side, how do we work towards our mission? So we do this through promoting health and wellness, bringing communities together through our programs and events, and by generally creating a fun and vibrant community. And as you can see on the slide, we do this through Movies in the Park, Harvest Festival, all the things listed there, and also Party in the Park. So we have 15 events throughout the year that we do this, and then our regular programs and services. Next slide, please. Also, under the general services category is the work that we do at the community center with a variety of classes, drop-in activities, social services, clinics. I would like to highlight the nutrition program and the meals that they provide. So in a calendar year, they'll do 7,600 in-person meals served at the center, an additional 20,000 home-delivered meals. And these in-person meals and programs provide an important social connection as well as feeding the seniors. The home-delivered meals also, in some cases, are the only touch point to the outside world, so that provides us a social service as well, sort of a critical welfare service. So these are vital services that we provide, and I'm really proud of the work that is done at the community center. Next slide, please. So for parks maintenance, we have 12 FTEs. We maintain 19 parks, 293 acres. That 293 acres will be increasing over the next 3 years by approximately 26 acres as we take on additional properties, both in developed parks, open spaces, and trail corridors. That picture that you see there is just one thing. So in addition to being good stewards of our parks and trails and open spaces and maintaining them, we also, the park maintenance team supports and drives projects. So this picture is the recent playground, inclusive playground build at Boones Ferry Park, which has been a huge hit. Next slide, please. So Wilsonville is a town of 25,000 and a relatively small department of Parks and Rec, has 3 official city boards and commissions, which as I talk with people that do what I do in the region, it's often a surprise to them how many boards and commissions we have for such a small department. But I'd like to talk briefly about the Parks and Rec Board. Obviously, they act as a community mouthpiece for our parks and our programs, but they also are the review panel for the Community Opportunity Grant, which is $25,000 annually that goes out to pretty much anybody that wants to apply for something that is for the betterment of the community. We also have the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Commission, which is in its third year now, and I believe it's also doing great things as you see our installations around the community. It is the community voice for all things arts, culture, and heritage related. They also have a grant, so they're the review panel for the Community Cultural Events and Programs Grant. That one's a little more focused and a little tighter as far as the parameters of who can apply. You have to be a nonprofit, but again, it's $25,000 annually, and that's for any, again, nonprofit that can do an event or program that is arts, culture, and benefits the community. And it's intended to bolster and empower the local nonprofits. And then we have not quite yet, the Sister City Advisory Board. The main purpose of this board is to maintain and strengthen the relationship with our sister city, Kitakata, Japan. One of the main ways they do this is through visiting student delegations, supporting those visits, and there is one scheduled for this December. And then just like to quickly mention the Korean War Memorial Foundation of Oregon, and how we, with the new Interpretive Center and the Korean War Memorial, we remember and honor Korean War veterans and their families. Go ahead, Catherine. And that's it. I went through pretty quick. Oh, I'd like to mention, as I mentioned, the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Commission, some of the recent work is the Wilsonville Hearts, Many Cultures, One Heart project, as you can see there on the screens. So 10 beautiful hearts done by 10 different artists that are placed around at city facilities and parks around town. And then the picture on the right is the new trail upgrade and ADA accessibility at the park at Merrifield. So thank you for your time. Any questions for me?
I do. First of all, I want to comment, you guys do a sensational job considering you have all those committees on your responsibility, so keep it up.
Thank you.
And something I got to ask, because my wife asked me tonight and I didn't have an answer. When those hearts are done displaying, where do they go?
Yeah, the intent is to have an auction, and then the proceeds from that auction will go towards funding a new art installation in the future.
That's wonderful. That's what I was thinking. So, okay, we'll be there.
Yeah, so you got your eye on one, Mayor?
Yeah. More than one.
Should I say your wife does, maybe? All right.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I had not a question. I just wanted to bring up the new parks signs that are around at all the parks. They look really nice, and it's a lot easier now to tell what parks are which, especially some of the smaller ones. So those are very nice. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I know we have forecasts for different funds in the book here, and I was hoping to see some sort of forecast for parks maintenance, especially with taking on that 26 acres in the next few years. Is there any sort of forecast? Am I missing in the book, or?
Well, it's in the general fund at large, so that level of detail is not shown, but we can certainly get you some.
There is a study that's mostly completed about parks maintenance needs.
As far as a park utility fee or a maintenance fee, or?
Well, and the backing for that in terms of the number of acres and the maintenance required and all that?
Well, our current master plan basically calls out number of FTEs per acre, and a 30-acre addition would trigger an FTE
So we have
to
it,
maintain our current level of service.
we have it in different documents. We're happy to provide that to you.
Great, thank you.
So the dog parks are part of your department, right?
The dog park at Memorial Park,
Yeah.
yes.
So I just wanted to call out that those parks are really well used and very popular, and I'm glad they're there. So thank you.
All right, not seeing any more questions, I'll dismiss myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, Just looking at, oh.
Can I do a quick time check? How much more time do you estimate on staff presentations? Last time around this time, we took a 10-minute break. And so I just wanted to see what you expect, how much more staff presentation you expect.
Let me get through, if I could get through Parks and Recreation really quick. And
Oh, we're
then
still
before
on
we
that.
segue into library, that would be a great stopping point. Thank you.
So we'll have library and then public safety, and then that'll be it for the city budget, and then we have a short urban renewal budget.
So you'll submit the numbers for the Parks Department, and then the chair can recess for however long you'd like.
Perfect. I'll be quick. So Parks and Recreation, overall, the proposed Parks and Recreation budget for general and community services reflects an increase in costs related to the community center, home delivered and in-person lunch programs, as Chris mentioned. In addition to increased costs, the number of community members who benefit from these programs also continues to grow. The proposed budget also includes a reduction, as you'll see under materials and services here, as we back out one-time grant-funded projects and purchasing that were included in the prior year budget. For example, the feasibility study of ADA access and a non-motorized boat ramp, dock at Boone's Ferry Park, and the purchase of new community center kitchen appliances. In total, bringing them from fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $2.3 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $2.2 million with no change in FTE. Next is park maintenance. It includes an increase in both utilities and landscape services attributable to those additional green spaces. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $2.9 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $3 million with no change in FTE. And that concludes our presentation on Parks and Rec.
Okay.
I move to have a 10-minute break.
10-minute break. We'll be back at 7:37.
Sorry, Chair, since it's been moved and seconded, can you call for a vote?
It's been moved and seconded. Can you, wait, so it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Any abstentions? It's been passed unanimously. 7:37.
Next up is library, for which I will turn it over to Library Director Shasta Sasser.
Good evening, Chair Moore and Budget Committee members. My name is Shasta Sasser, and I'm the Library Director. First, I thought I would set the stage a little bit and build some context for our budget story by talking about what we've been doing this year. We're in the middle of our strategic plan. That strategic plan goes through 2026. Part of that was a DEI collections intern. That position was funded by the Library Foundation. And we had an intern come in, do some research, create a methodology and a framework for evaluating our teen fiction collection. And then also gave us some tools to take that evaluation forward in the future as we have capacity to do so in other collections. We added a 0.5 youth services librarian, and that was to help with programming and to make sure that we had a youth services librarian at the desk during our open hours. We added a new book return, so those who didn't want to come across town to the library could return their materials at the transit center. And then we've increased partnerships and school visits, and we've expanded outreach services, particularly with adults. Our outreach services librarian is going to some of the care facilities and screening our profiles, programs, and doing book clubs, that sort of thing. She's also been going to daycares, which is new for us, and doing some story times and things there. And we've begun a collections evaluation project, which was called out in our strategic plan. A piece of that is the DEI collections evaluation, but it's also taking a broader look and looking at our collection as a whole. You know, maybe we're spending X amount of money on Westerns and X amount on science fiction, but science fiction is checking out 4 times more than Westerns. So we would look at what we're spending, a lot of factors and statistics in that one, and then make some adjustments based on community need. So our budget story this year, largely we're status quo, but I thought I would call out a couple things that are out of the ordinary. Link-wide, our county library district is getting new self-checkout machines. Our current ones have reached the end of their anticipated life cycle, and so that's happening at the county level with county procurement. And the county has set aside some funds for this, so what I put in was for our portion, which is not covered by that county funding. They've progressed a little further in the procurement process since we started this budget process, and it looks like our contribution will be less than what I budgeted, so that's always good news. We're also going to be replacing our catalog computers, which have reached the end of their lifespan as well. A few have begun to fail, and those are not through our city IT, but our county IT support. We also did some right sizing of our Friends and Foundation contributions. We're super lucky to have 2 nonprofits that support us and help us in a lot of areas in programming. And so they have agreed to give us more contributions going forward. It actually will look like a reduction from the current year, but that's because we had a couple big projects this current year, the DEI intern that I mentioned, and the book bike, which the Friends is supporting us on. So let's see. The last one is the initial costing and fundraising sketches for the children's patio. So we did a renovation in 2017, and we added patron access to a patio outside of our children's room. That patio has been a huge hit. Families are out there all the time, even when it's, you know, not the best weather. But it really needs, it wasn't necessarily intended to be used in the way it's getting used. So we would like to do some improvements, like making the ground softer, getting some new fencing out there, and maybe a partial cover so it can be enjoyed more of the year. And the foundation has shown some interest in that project. So what we need to do first is the costing and getting some fundraising images, and then we can have the foundation run with that and do some fundraising for that project. And then just looking ahead, as I mentioned, the implementation of our strategic plan, we have 1 more year. In that year, we need to look at our marketing plan, get that updated, finish that big collections evaluation project with many reports and statistics, and then progress our long-range staffing plan as we can. We're doing some evaluations and looking at things with that. And then before we know it, in 26, 27, it'll be time to start the new strategic planning process and creating a new strategic plan, which we would like to do the same process as last year, which included a lot of engagement with the community. So that's what we're hoping to do again. That's what's coming up with the library.
Thank you, Shasta. So the proposed library budget includes, as Shasta mentioned, the reduction of FTE for that intern that was budgeted this year for a specific 3-month assignment. The library budget also includes contract services for the design of the children's patio and the library district-wide replacements of self-checkout machines and catalog computers. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 24-25 amended budget of $2.8 million to a fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget of $3.0 million. And that concludes our presentation for library. Before we turn it back over to Keith, are there any additional questions for Shasta?
Shasta, I know this isn't really a library question, maybe it's a foundation question, but I know you know it. You know the bricks that people can purchase for fundraising, is that still going on?
It is. They did increase the cost of the bricks a couple years ago just because they had to change vendors for various reasons.
Okay. 'Cause I thought that was a great idea.
It is still available, so you can, if you feel so inclined, you can purchase a brick and they'll put a plate on it, either in memory of somebody or some of them have library quotes, anything that you'd like to put on it.
I think it's great. We have one for the law firm, we have one for the family, and so we'll probably get some more. So thank you. It's good fundraising.
Okay. You can excuse yourself, Shasta.
I will excuse myself, thank you.
And we will have public safety. I think we have Gina Troha and Chief Warps coming up.
Well, at least I don't have to invite myself up, so that's good. Chair Moore and Council, welcome to me, I guess. Good evening. That's where I meant to start. I'm sorry. Good evening. I'm Robert Wirfs. I'm the Chief of Police out here in Wilsonville. And so tonight we'll tell a little bit about our budget story here. I put a historical picture up there because I like history. And so the first IGA was actually signed here in 1979, and I think Gina actually found a typed copy of that, which is kind of cool. But we have been providing police services even prior to that since Wilsonville's incorporation. A big public outreach is big to me. Most of you that know me understand that. And so these are kind of the pictures of various public events that we really like to gain the public's trust by having them get to know us firsthand and in person, and not just when there's a crisis or some really bad thing happening, because we get painted into that corner a lot just because we're always there on your worst day. So what we're trying to do here is not be there on the worst day, just be there on a normal day. And so that's Shop with a Cop event. We do that annually too, and we get some great donations to help some underprivileged kids get some nice Christmas gifts for themselves and their family. Next slide, please. And really, we have a community-focused philosophy, and one of the programs I'm really proud of and I think has been really successful here in Wilsonville is the behavioral health clinician. That has been really exceeded my expectations. I kind of had a vision for that, and it's gone well beyond that. I think that's a really excellent program. Another important thing we like to do is work with all our partners. Code compliance is one we probably intersect with a lot, but we intersect with transit, we intersect with parks, and so our relationships with all those are good. It's really quick for them to pick up the phone and get a hold of me or one of the sergeants and get in front of problems as quickly as possible without any barriers or siloing or any of that. So really that joint approach is very important teamwork. One of our other big outreaches to our youth in particular is our school resource officer. I shared this last year, but this CAR program was another really neat program where the students actually created the logo for that. And several students submitted different logos. They had a vote, and that one actually won and then was actually implemented on our SRO car. So that was a fun way to engage students, and that car is a really great icebreaker in community events, makes us him in particular much more approachable, but overall it's just a great icebreaker and community connection thing. Next slide, please. So again, our priorities, public safety, that's first and foremost. That's our primary duty, our safety, your safety, and then service. I'm a very service-oriented guy. Most of our conversations talk about customer service and that sort of thing. The other thing we engage in is problem-oriented policing. So what we try to do is identify problems and then work as a team to come up with creative solutions, not just the cookie-cutter approach to drive through once and wave or whatever it is, but we try to really be much more thoughtful about how we approach problems when we see them. These photos here, I think we were working with SMART on a bike rodeo. It's one of our officers on a police bike engaging there. And then also what you see here, this is a great, we actually ran into Gina out walking our dog, so you can recognize her in the photo there. But that's our guys. I encourage them a lot, especially when the weather's nice, to get out into the parks and do foot patrol. It's a great way to, again, interact with community and scare off some ne'er-do-wells if there are any. That's Melissa Campos, Andrew Landstrom, and Nate Bamfey. Those are all folks assigned out here, so that was just a really opportune photo there. It was great. Next slide, please. And then, so we we run 24/7. We're the only agency in the city that runs 24/7. And so with that, we respond to everything from barking dogs or dogs on the loose to homicide. It's the whole and everything in between. So we never quite know what's coming at us, but we're ready to handle it to the best of our ability. At the end of last year, we saw quite a few big complex calls, and this is when it matters. Like, again, community engagement, coffee with a cop, all the community stuff, that's great, but we also have to be very competent at our response to dangerous situations and extreme situations. And we're good at that. We've got top of the line crime scene investigators that preserve evidence, take photos, collect it, make sure all the chain of custody is correct going into the court testimony at a later time. We have 2 detectives full-time assigned to the city, but some of those calls that we experienced at the end of last year actually required far more than that. And so one of the advantages of being a contracted service is that we have access to a large detective pool, and we probably had 10 to 15 detectives working those cases at different times, because scenes like that, they require a lot of response and work. And then the courtroom testimony. So these cases don't end at the end of that shift. They go on for weeks, and our detectives prepare and then want to be the most professional. And we want to represent the victim, hold offenders accountable. So again, that's just that long-term work on these very difficult cases. We've got access to top-of-the-line accident reconstruction for crime scenes and car accidents. We also have access to drones and actually an aircraft base right out here of Aurora. We're trained in incident command, so we can set up and command and control these scenes fairly seamlessly and quickly. And we also even have a canine search dog assigned to the city right now. Well, or actually ours is a canine enforcement dog, search dogs, a little bit different. But these are just it's kind of a snapshot of the real high value stuff that requires a lot of training and a lot of expertise in each of these categories. So we got a good thing going on there. Next slide, please. And then better news, that was, talking about homicides and stuff, that's a little bit dark. But on the lighter side, we've really got some great people doing some great work. 2 I want to talk about today. On the left, Deputy Chris O'Connor. He's been out here for many, many years. And he was recently highlighted for his work with someone who was that he encountered during law enforcement. He's done a lot of work on a neighborhood livability program, so he's very familiar with resources, connecting people to resources, so he's not just about enforcement. Sometimes it's much more about connection and feeding or getting people to the right resource for whatever issue they're facing. And in this case, he got this guy Shelby lined up and going, and then COVID hit and kind of set us all back a little bit and made things a little confusing for a while. And so that caused Shelby some trouble, and then Chris reconnected with him, got him back on track to the services he needed. So that was just a really great connection story. And then on the right, Sergeant Ritter, he's also worked out here as our day shift supervisor for several years. And very recently, I had the honor of attending his award ceremony. He got the North Star Leadership Award, and that came from the Domestic Violence Center that we have, the Family Justice Center, and Clackamas Women's Services, more in particular, recognized him for his dedication to child advocacy. He has a long history in combating human trafficking, and also off-duty, he's well known in Malala for being the coach of almost all sports out there and has been for about 20 years. So his engagement with youth, to use a pun, on and off the court is beyond the pale. It's great. So I just wanted to highlight some of the better news. Next slide, please. And then I can touch on, this isn't exactly my department, but I'm happy to touch on this, and Gina can back me if there's any heavy questions that come with code compliance. And I really want to give a shout out to David. He's really just been an excellent guy to work with. He's got an approach that I really love, that he just wears Hawaiian shirts to work, and that just breaks the ice. He's able to really gain compliance without going down the enforcement route. He's been great for our officers to work with, to really get things in order without having to be a jerk about it or having to go to the enforcement heavy-handed approach. So he's got a real great approach. He's really good at talking to people, and frankly, just his approach and demeanor solves most issues without us having to get involved. So that's really helpful for our officers as well. Anything else to add to that, Gina? Okay. And I think that's probably the last slide for me.
I can cover that one. I'll cover this slide. This slide is Ask the City, and it says code compliance up there, but really this is a system that the city has where residents can log in, express any, kind of concern or issue or things that they would like us to look into. It gives you a drop-down menu there so you can put it in by category, or if it doesn't fit in one of those categories, you don't have to categorize it. You can download this. There's an app, or you can do it from the city's website. It is really a great tool for you to be able to connect with the appropriate staff person. We are very quick to respond to these. A lot of them come in for code compliance. You can take a picture, which is even better. I know David always appreciates that if you've got a photo that goes along with whatever the concern is that you would like us to look into. So this is really just a plug for all of you, as well as the folks that you know in this community, to utilize this service. It really is a fantastic way for you to interact with us. And I think we're happy to answer any questions. Right, Chief Werps?
Yes, we are. Excited.
I have another kind of non-question. I just wanted to share that last year there was an incident near where I live. It was like a faulty battery thing that was causing a car alarm to go off. And the person whose car it was, she was very young, very stressed out about the whole thing. By the time I got there, someone had already called the police, and the police who showed up, they were very calm, offered a lot of services, tried to just kind of put her at ease for the situation, and try to work through it. And I just wanted to say thank you for that response. It helped a lot in that situation.
Thanks for sharing that. I love hearing that stuff. Thank you.
I have a question. It might be more for the money people. And this is not a comment on your services, because I think you guys are doing great, but have we ever done an analysis on like just the cost of if we had our own police department versus the county? I'm sure we know those numbers typically, but is it more expensive or less expensive to go through the county sheriffs?
A formal study? I don't know that we've done a formal study. I can just tell you anecdotally that it would be more, because we would have to have a modern police facility that had a evidence room and everything that goes with those facilities. We would not get close to what we have for specialized services. Then you'd have to plan for overtime, so you'd have to have more officers than we have now because of our contract. So we haven't done a formal study, but I can tell you anecdotally, we've looked at it before. I think when I first got here, there was some discussion about it. It wouldn't pencil out. We're too far down the road. Doesn't mean at some point in the future you couldn't, certainly anybody can look at it in the future, but like comparing the city of, I think we did some comparisons to other cities.
I did a spreadsheet, and even Woodburn's comparable in size with some complexities, but I think it was right around 12 million or so. One of the things that does save us money is because if you look at the amount of officers we have right now, there's 23 in total. That includes our mental health clinician. That's very low in similar sized cities, because if we have someone who goes on vacation or military leave or FMLA, whatever the case is, we can put up an overtime line and have a county deputy come in to fill that slot. So we don't have to hire up to account for all those extra leaves. So that's probably one of the primary cost savings there.
Well, and then aside from the building that is inadequate, but it's better than what it was.
We're happy, yeah.
Right, but it's not a modern police facility.
Correct.
Because your intake is you take people to Oregon City, right?
Correct.
All your evidence is in Oregon City.
We have some temporary holding, but yeah, you'd have to have a records department. You'd have to increase your fleet program.
I was going to say fleet would be a big one as
HR,
well.
legal, requires, a lot of all those support services are built into this too, which is pretty helpful.
I've just always been curious about that. Other question is then, how often do like the rotations work from general sheriff's office just to Wilsonville?
So the county, they bid every 6 months. However, for the contract cities, it's a 1 year minimum and a 5-year maximum. And even that maximum's sort of a maximum because that same person can put in again at the 5-year mark. But it's based on seniority. They select shift and days off. What we're seeing right now, last bump period, we had no one rotate out. Actually, the first time since that anybody can remember that's happened. So what we're seeing right now is there's quite a few folks who are here for the long haul. The specialty positions, detectives, school resource officers, traffic cars, they're all on 5-year. They can reapply for those positions after the 5 years as well. So we do get quite a few folks who are here and dedicated and very familiar with the city.
Some question. So, how are the bikes coming along?
The bikes?
Yeah, when I was on the budget committee a few years ago, I was hoping that, we can see more of those bikes near the middle schools and all that. How, I know we were trying to invest in that. How are we doing?
We got the traditional mountain bikes right now, and the one thing I've been exploring with some excitement is electric bikes, some e-assisted bikes.
Yeah.
Because you can cover a lot more distance without expending as much energy, if you will. Yeah. Well, I mean, they go pretty fast, but no, we're not. I doubt we'll be chasing down cars or anything like that. But so we're still exploring that. But right now, the active program just includes our traditional bikes, and it's all weather dependent. But we hope that good weather is coming soon, so hopefully we'll see more of that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, we can do the numbers, and then if you have additional questions, we can relay those too. Their 24-25 budget for code enforcement and law enforcement together was $6.9 million. Had some contractual price increases for the Clackamas County Sheriff's contract, and we get to the proposed 25-26 budget of $7.5 million. We have one code enforcement officer and an array of police officers for this combined department. Also in this umbrella is municipal court, of course. It's a traffic court. They don't handle any kind of misdemeanors or anything of that. So this is all traffic. We have a budget of $200,000, and it goes up a little bit, $254,000. 1.65 FTEs cover the court for the city. And that is public safety in a nutshell. And then we just have a brief discussion of the general fund, and then we will finish our portion of the presentation tonight. But if there's any further questions for the chief, can we move on?
Excuse myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
So like I said, we're coming into the home stretch here, and here is a visual representation of kind of what we talked about not yesterday, it was last week, I guess, at our last budget meeting, where we highlighted in Brian Cosgrove's budget message, the general fund is projected to face an ongoing structural imbalance in the 5-year forecast ahead. So beyond the one-time revenue spike we will receive from TVWD from that lease payoff in fiscal year 26-27, projected general fund expenses are expected to outpace anticipated revenues as we go forward into the future here, beyond this budget year. We're talking the next year and the next year and the next year after that. And that imbalance is primarily driven by the rising costs in the key areas we've kind of touched on, parks capital improvements, ongoing maintenance in parks and recreation, the increased police contract expenses. Additionally, as Chris Hammerman mentioned, the city is set to assume responsibility for 26 acres of additional parks, trails, and open space over the next 3 years. And as we touched on when we were talking about property tax in the last budget meeting, is the challenge of the city's relatively low permanent tax rate of that 2.5206 per 1,000, which really limits ongoing revenue growth in comparison to rising service demand and costs. So really without the identification of new revenue sources or implementation of cost-saving strategies or a combination of both, the general fund balance will become unsustainable out in the future. And while there's no immediate action needed here tonight, this really is just to prompt near-term discussion on potential solutions, and that can include alternative revenue options, operational efficiencies that we can explore, and or potential future adjustments to service levels. So just kind of wanted to give you this visual representation of that discussion we had last week's budget meeting, and it's also reflected in the back of the budget book. In the appendix, we do a 5-year forecast of all the operating funds. So you can see the bottom line is the financial policy minimum down there. When we're getting out to 28, 29, and 29, 30 fiscal years, we're getting down there. So potentially, like I say, we have some time to, in our year ahead, to figure out some solutions to this. So I'll just leave that there at the 5-year forecast. And with that is our concluding remarks on the fiscal year 25-26 budget. So if there's any additional questions, we can entertain those here. Or...
I have a question.
Yeah.
As we start thinking about future budgets, can you give me a couple examples of what you mean by operational efficiencies so that I can ponder that as we move forward?
Well, it could be just the way we leverage technology. The city, for the past, I've been here going on 25 years, it's vastly changed the operating expectations of anything. We're really a 24-hour city hall now in terms of, the internet and all that. So leveraging technology in some fashion to offset some past practices of how we're still doing things could be looked at. I don't know, Brian, do you have any we're still kind of exploring and routing some of these out.
It would be looking at everything that we do in terms of, do we need 40 hours a week of front counter service for every department? Or can we direct people more to, we place a very high value on customer service in this city. It's part of our DNA. But as we look forward into the future in terms of some of the constraints we have operationally, we may have to become less customer friendly in order to meet this brave new world that we're in terms of revenues and resources. So everything would be coming to the city council as recommendations. So part of your council goals is to look at this in depth. Right. One other thing we could look at is 410s. So that maybe we're closing facilities. Clackamas County did that for a number of years ago. So it's anything and everything that we could look at that would be reasonable to bring back to you in terms of recommendations, and also talking about some of the unintended consequences that could result from that. So a lowering of customer service expectations, but we would bring data before we made any of those recommendations. Okay.
Well, but just to dovetail on, the focus of customer service has certainly changed.
Right,
like you said.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay. I won't go into philosophy.
But Keith, excuse me, but part of our goals also is to look at potential alternative sources of income to try to maintain as well.
Right, so there's the cost side and then there's the revenue side. So I think it would be responsible for any city manager or policy maker that you want to know you're controlling the cost side before you're asking for new revenue. So that's all we're suggesting here.
Right, and when you look at our, permanent property tax rate, 2.5 per 1,000 of assessed value, that was established, was it 1998, I think, with the Measure 50, at a snapshot in time where the city was operating at one level, not necessarily operating at that level anymore. We're kind of a low-cost leader when you're kind of comparing other municipalities of that permanent tax rate of what services they're offering. We've been able to offer, glide on that permanent tax rate for quite a while, but over the past few years, cost escalations and looking into the future, may have to take a look at some of that. And Chris Ammerman mentioned kind of one of the things off the side, parks maintenance fee. Some other cities employ this, or local option levies are always as an option. Some of the cities like Tigard and offhand, I know, has one. So those are the types of things we're going to be bringing back to council at some point for additional discussion, as well as with the operating efficiencies and just really looking at what we need to do in the future. So if there's any additional questions, we can turn it back over to the chair, and then just to remind everybody not to leave right away because we have another public hearing right after this one. It's very short, relatively short, urban renewal budget meeting.
All right, so I'll take it there are no further questions from the Budget Committee to staff at this time. Okay. Are there any members of the public who previously did not testify, who now wish to testify regarding the 25-26 proposed budget? And then does staff have any further presentation or comments at this time regarding the 25-26 budget? No. Seeing no further requests to testify, the public hearing on the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget is now closed at 8:10. At this time, does anyone have a motion on the City of Wilsonville fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget? And you can see the language that could be used below.
I move for approval of the fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget in the total amount of $228,927,800 and levying the full amount of the city general tax rate at $2.5206.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
That was Shevlin, okay. The motion to approve the fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget has been made by committee member Russell and seconded by Councilor Shevlin, is that right? Yeah. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion?
I have discussion.
Yep.
It's been brought up tonight. Apparently I know how to draw a crowd. Going back to that transit budget, I still have an issue with it. Every other department has not asked for a significant expansion of their departments. They have gone with the status quo route. If you look at page 313, the transit fund is on a downward decline over the next 5 years in the forecast, yet we're looking at adding employees that are only going to add to that issue. Those employees don't disappear. They're paid for right now by SMART, but they will end up being PERS employees that will end up being paid in perpetuity by the city. We have these issues. We have a declining fund here, and we're talking about adding 5 FTEs to this department. I don't see how it's responsible. I brought up the other issues around it, and that's my position on that.
Well, if I may, in looking at the numbers, and, you know, I've been fairly quiet tonight because I've been on the Budget Committee probably longer than anybody in this room with 1 year hiatus. So generally what I do is when I want to ask questions of staff, I send an email in asking questions and I get great answers. I don't lead by ambushes. And if you had looked at things, you'll find that the STIF funds, which come from, correct me if I'm wrong, primarily support those FTEs, and those STIF funds come from outside the city. And that has no impact as far as I'm concerned. And this has been an ongoing discussion and planned for years, even when I was on the Budget Committee. So it's not like something that it's well thought of. It supports a very key Voila building that is important to our community. It brings connection and belonging to key members of our community. And I think that this is all a show. And if we had acted consistently like most council that I've watched as a budget member citizen, we would have asked questions privately, sent an email in, gotten the answers, and you would be surprised instead of ambushes of staff, which I thought was inappropriate that last meeting. So I totally support this budget. I honor our city manager who worked so hard in his role to present this last budget in a very thoughtful way, in a very efficient, professional way, supported by our finance director, who I trust after over 25 years of service, along with Ms. Smith. So I think that trying to present an opposite view, just for the sake of having an opposite view politically, is not in the best interest of our city. So I think this is a great budget. I urge all members unanimously to vote for it. Thank you.
Mayor, if you're going to call me out, you're welcome to look at me while you do it.
I'm being polite. Okay, I'm being polite.
You're welcome to look at me while you do it. Asking questions as a member of this committee is not an ambush. It's asking questions, it's finding answers, and it's ensuring that we're doing our jobs here.
Counselor, let me explain as mayor. There is an etiquette and protocol that you did not follow, and you disrespected a staff member in that first meeting. You start following the rules, and that was inappropriate. And I'll be glad to look at you.
How did I disrespect the staff member?
By not even asking the questions in advance to give them a heads up so they can plan accordingly.
Plan accordingly for questions about the budget that they are presenting.
By, if you have hard questions to ask, letting them know what those questions are in advance. That's what we historically do.
Were those hard questions?
How you presented them was disrespectful to staff.
I absolutely disagree.
That's fine.
I have
You're
a different perspective, and I'm allowed to explain and provide that perspective.
And I gave
because I
you
think
mine.
it's important that we talk about public safety, and I think it's important that we talk about not importing crime into our city and creating a situation where somebody standing at the Clackamas Town Center looks over at the Home Depot and sees an armed security guard standing there, an area with a high rate of crime, a substantially higher rate than a lot of Clackamas County. And then they look over and they see a free bus to Wilsonville and they jump on that bus because we don't have armed security guards here that are going to stop them.
Yeah, I don't think, you failed to ask Police Chief Forbes, but I don't think he would have that same opinion. So I think you're.
Maybe you should email him that question then.
Chair, may I make a comment?
Sure.
I believe that that an assumption is being made without facts, that someone that rides transit is going to bring crime to our community. That's what I heard last week. Let me finish, please.
I haven't said anything. You cut me off last week, but I won't cut you off this week.
I believe that people are entitled to use transit. That doesn't make them, just because someone has a lower income, doesn't mean that they bring crime to our community. Of course, we have to worry about crime. We have to worry about safety. But I'm not concerned about people that are using our public transit, such as we're given examples this evening, of people just like me, like any one of us in this room, that want to not drive in traffic, want to use public transit. Those are the people that I want to bring to Wilsonville. Of course, we have to worry about crime. I believe our police chief does a great job dealing with crime. Thank you.
To address your point, I don't think that everyone who rides transit is a criminal. That's an absurd characterization of my comments. It's like saying that the drivers out here are just bad drivers. It doesn't mean every driver's a bad driver. It means that there's some bad drivers here and there. I'm not saying that people that ride transit are bad people or that they are criminals, but there is an element of utilizing transit for people to travel to other areas and commit crimes. It's absolutely true. September 7th, 2023, headline, 100% of surfaces tested, or 100% of max transit tested had signs of methamphetamine, and half of them had signs of fentanyl. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to hook right up to that system. We're opening a can of worms here. Some people aren't going to recognize it. Some people aren't going to share my concerns. That's okay. I understand that. But I am going to voice my concerns, and I am going to ask the questions, and I am going to point these things out because they need to be part of the discussion. I absolutely reject the characterization that I ambushed staff and I was disrespectful. I asked questions about the topic in an open forum. We're allowed to do that.
Did you, Counselor, send emails to staff in advance of the meeting, of the budget meeting, to ask questions? Yes or no, please?
No.
That's what I thought. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Attorney time.
Can we call for the vote?
Is there any further discussion from the Budget Committee before we call for a vote?
So I would like to add, not that you want me to add, just in terms of the financial aspect that you brought up in the declining fund. I think it's important to note that a lot of the funds show a decline in reserves. It's not just transit. But you did mention how they're requesting an increase. And I think it's important to bring up what Dwight had mentioned about his kind of approach is using other people's money. So a lot of this is like the taxes and the STIF funds and a lot of kind of city general fund, which supports a lot of that. So I think that's important to note as well, that it's not just city general fund.
Right. Yeah, and I understand that, and I think it's important to note with the declining fund, if it gets to a certain point, we're going to have to look at other options to fund that. And one of those things, one of the things, I actually, in a council meeting recently, I praised our transit system and I praised the idea that we have SMART in town because I listened to other communities discussing their issues with TriMet and the reduction of their TriMet lines. And I think that SMART is smart. And I'm not trying to get rid of SMART. The issue that I see is that if that fund goes to a certain low level, if we continue on this trajectory, we have to look for other funding mechanisms. And that could be an increase in payroll taxes, which is going to hurt our local businesses. It's one of the things that SMART hangs its hat on, that we have about a 50% lower payroll tax than TriMet. And so I'm urging caution here. I'm concerned that with a declining fund, expansion of a system doesn't seem to make sense to me. I think if we were a business looking at a graph like this, we wouldn't want to continue expanding on something that's heading that direction, especially when with that expansion, it's still showing a downward trend. So I don't see how it's positive and it's in our best interest.
Any further discussion before we call for a vote? All right, with the motion being proposed and seconded and discussion ensued, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No.
And I hear one no.
You need a roll call vote?
As long as the chair understands the outcome of the vote and the numbers, we don't need a roll call vote.
Yeah.
So it's up to you, Chair, to elect whether you want to do a roll call vote.
No, I don't see it as necessary. We have all in favor and then one no. So that's been recorded.
So the motion carried 8-1.
The motion carried 8-1. Okay. Having no further business on the agenda, I adjourn the City of Wilsonville Budget Committee meeting at 8:23 p.m. And we have one more public meeting, the Urban Renewal Budget Meeting. I call to order the May 13th, 2025 meeting of the Budget Committee of the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency. Will the agency recorder please do the roll call?
Chair Chris Moore.
Here.
Larissa Byers.
Here.
Thank you. Tyler Beach.
Here.
Cynthia Russell.
Here.
Toby Trauber.
Here.
Sean O'Neill.
Here.
Caroline Berry.
Here.
Katie Dunwell. Adam Cunningham.
Here.
Ann Shevlin.
Here.
Thank you.
Chair, I would like to note that Counselor, Committee Member Dunwell, her absence is excused, for the record.
For the record, thank you. Can I have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
It has been moved by Mayor O'Neill and seconded by Councilor Cunningham to approve the order of agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 15th, 2024 Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting?
So moved.
Second? It has been moved by Mayor O'Neill and seconded by Councilor Berry to approve the May 15th, 2024 Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting minutes. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The motion carries unanimously. I call to order the Budget Committee public hearing on the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget at 8:25 p.m. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in the following manner. As a courtesy, members of the public have the option to provide public testimony on the proposed budget before the staff presentations begin in order to accommodate those citizens who do not want to wait until the presentations have been made to speak. Community members may elect to wait to testify until after the staff presentations have been completed. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. The timed buzzer will go off when the 3 minutes are up. I think that will happen this time, if we have any. Staff will present their report. Additional public testimony will be allowed regarding the proposed fiscal year budget for community members who elected to wait to testify. And then finally, after all community members who wish to speak have testified, staff will have time to provide any additional comments to the committee. Information regarding how the public could attend this meeting and give testimony is posted at City Hall and was also timely published in the Wilsonville Spokesman and is also published on the city's website shown on the screen. Notice was given that the testimony could be submitted for the record in advance in writing by emailing or mailing it to the city recorder. If you are listening to this meeting remotely when the time for public testimony is called, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom or press *9 on your telephone if you would like to testify. If you're having difficulties with these instructions, you may call the number shown on the screen and enter webinar ID number shown on the screen when prompted. When called up to testify, state your full name and address for the record. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that's already been given to the Budget Committee. Simply indicating you agree with the prior testimony given by a speaker you identify is sufficient. Is there anyone wishing to testify? Hearing no further requests to testify, the city manager will kick off the budget presentation with the budget message followed by staff presentations.
City manager defers to the finance director.
Okay, that's fine. And just like the regular city budget, there is a pretty compelling budget message for the urban renewal plan or the urban renewal agency. It's located on page 263 of your budget book. Well worth a read, kind of the Cliff Notes version of what's happening with our urban renewal agency and the 2 plans we have and 1 program. Of course, we still have the legacy of the West Side plan, but the the MID, which is called the maximum indebtedness. All urban renewal plans have an MID. We've reached it with that plan. We're no longer collecting tax increment on it. We just have one project. We've got the fund. We're just ready for the completion or the construction of the Brown Road project. West Side plan, of course, is essentially Villebois with that Brown Road linkage down to Old Town. Coffee Creek plan up in the north has a 67 million maximum indebtedness. We've got 62 million of that remaining. The project's listed there on the screen. We've completed Garden Acres Road, and for this next budget cycle, we're starting some day road sewer planning work. I think it's, sewer extension. I'll go on into the next slide. And then the one program we do have is called, it's pretty innovative. It's the Wilsonville Investment Now WIN program. It's site-specific incentive program. The one qualifying organization or company that we have is Twist Bioscience. In that, it's a rebate program. It's got a 7-year lifespan or a 10 million maximum rebate program. They started out with a frozen base on that property of 3.6 million. They've invested up to, or it's topping now at 83 million is the current value of that property with that Twist program in there. They've created, been pretty successful for the city in that program. We've got 200 high-paying jobs there. And the benefit of that is, of course, the multiplier effect of having wages and income like that in your city, the recirculating of money. Every dollar that's spent in the community or earned in the community has a lifespan that goes much further than the initial wage, of course. And they're paying state income tax and city transit tax on that right now. But for that program, that frozen base of 3.6 million may still be sitting there. So it's been a pretty successful program for the city. It's just a one property urban renewal program. Those are the two plans in one program we have. And of course, it's for a total budget of 9.4 million, and that's 9.4 million in total resources. And of course, they're going to match 9.4 million in total requirements. You see them on the screen columnized by the three plans we have existing, in the tax increment only being collected on Coffee Creek and for the Wind District. Revenue for urban renewal is generated through that tax increment on assessed value over that frozen base, which is established at the beginning of the urban renewal plan. Overlapping tax districts, including the city, forego the growth in that property tax revenue within the urban renewal areas that exceeds that frozen base. So it's that 1.9 million is the kind of the foregone revenue, which is the total revenue of the urban renewal plan of that 1.9. So the tax increment coming from that Wind District is 1.2, but but for that rebate program, that tax increment might not even exist at all. It certainly wouldn't exist at that level. So the division of tax, now that's that's the administrative process that is used by the county assessor to allocate this tax increment to the urban renewal agency. It's important to note that the urban renewal does not impose a new tax, and instead it's redistributing the existing property tax revenue. So the amount shown on a property owner's annual statement reflects the cumulative reduction in allocation to overlapping taxing districts, including the city, due to that redistribution. And just one or two more caveats on that. Bonded debt levies and local option levies are not included in, or they are excluded from the division of tax process that happens at the county level. Also, schools are taken out of the urban renewal equation, and that's because of the Oregon's school funding equalization formula is what they call. Urban renewal does not impact overall school funding. School districts receive roughly equal funding per student statewide, regardless of local property tax collections. The state backfills kind of any shortfalls on that. So that's a long-winded explanation of that tax increment that we're receiving for those two districts. It's basically across 1.9 million. For other resources, there's some small investment revenue, some debt proceeds in the Coffee Creek, and the beginning existing balance. Most of that beginning balance is in the west side. That 5.8 million is what we're holding to complete that Brown Road project. And as you can see, when we get down to the requirements here, the capital projects of that 2.9 under the west side is the Brown Road, and there's some capital project activity in Coffee Creek for that Day Road sewer extension of 600 million, or 600,000, I'm sorry. And so the total RESAs of 9.4 million will equal the total requirements of the urban renewal combined plans. And that's all I really have on the urban renewal, unless there's any other questions on this budget here tonight. Other than that,
Any questions from the Budget Committee to staff? And that concluded your
yeah,
presentation?
sorry.
Yep, okay. Are there any members of the public who previously did not testify who now wish to testify regarding urban renewal 25-26 proposed budget? And then does staff have any further presentation or comments at this time regarding the proposed budget? No. All right, seeing no further requests to testify, the public hearing on the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget is now closed at 8:34 p.m. Does anyone have a motion on the Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 25-26 proposed budget?
I move for approval of the 25-26 proposed budget for the City of Wilsonville Urban Renewal Agency in the amount of $9,429,791 and levy the full amount of the divide the taxes amount for the Coffee Creek District and the Wind Twist Bioscience plants.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
The motion to approve the Urban Renewal Agency's 25-26 proposed budget has been made by Committee Member Russell and seconded by Committee Member Trauber. Any discussion? And we'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? The outcome of the vote is that the motion is passed unanimously. Having no further business on the agenda, I adjourn this Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting at 8:36 p.m. Thank you.